They call it a slowdown, a correction, a soft landing. But nothing about this moment resembles a landing. What we are living through doesn't behave like a recession, because recessions end. It doesn't behave like inflation, because inflation has an origin point. This feels older, quieter, structured in a way that rewards the system at the exact pace it drains the participant. On paper, the economy looks healthy. Record market highs, low unemployment, positive GDP. But paper isn't where the collapse is happening. The fracture is in the lived reality. Wages statistically rising, while purchasing power mathematically falls. Savings evaporating without being spent. Debt increasing without consumption growing. Something detached. Something decoupled. A six-figure salary used to represent success. Now it represents basic survival. Not because individuals failed, but because the benchmark moved and nobody announced it. If this were normal, someone would say so. If it were temporary, they wouldn't need new language to hide the damage. This is not inflation, not recession, not mismanagement. This is something older, more engineered, a silent depression, designed to look like survival, not collapse. And the real question is not what caused it, but who benefits when you believe it's your fault. The charts say recovery, the headlines say stability, but the math of daily life disagrees. 2 incomes and still not enough. Adults moving back home because rent became impossible. Starter homes priced at 10 times annual income, where 3 used to be the norm. Inflation reports say 3 to 6%, but rent climbed 20 to 30. Groceries cost 30 to 40% more, with no return to baseline. This isn't a malfunction. It's extraction disguised as progress. For most of the 20th century, there was a contract. As productivity rose, wages followed. As the country prospered, households did too. That correlation has collapsed. Productivity is skyrocketing due to automation. Output rises while the cost of labor stagnates. Corporations don't need workers to thrive, only to participate. Pay rent, pay subscriptions, pay interest. Keep moving. The modern economy doesn't need you wealthy. It just needs you solvent enough to continue. Survival as a service. Progress without prosperity. And once you accept that contradiction, everything else makes sense. This isn't unprecedented, only unacknowledged. Japan's lost decade began with optimism and ended with a generation that never recovered. Weimar collapsed not when prices spiked, but in the quiet years before, when wages detached from reality and nobody reacted fast enough. History doesn't repeat, it whispers, and most people aren't listening. Because this collapse has no breadlines, no dust bowls, no iconic photograph. It's private, internal, silent. It takes the form of postponed healthcare, credit card balances as emergency funds, a savings account that stays the same number while the value dissolves, a life that looks stable on the outside and bankrupt on the inside. Follow the ownership. Between 2024 and 2025, in multiple U.S. cities, more than half of entry-level homes were not purchased by families, but by institutions. Not first-time buyers, not young couples. Funds. Homes shifted from shelter to inventory. Families shifted from owners to users. And a user can be priced, modeled, forecasted. Ownership ends dependency. Dependency creates revenue. If rent takes half your income, you can't save. If you can't save, you can't invest. If you can't invest, you can't exit. Debt becomes a subscription. Survival becomes a contract. And the future becomes collateral. Corporate landlords don't need you to ever buy. In fact, the worst outcome for some balance sheets would be if you did. Because ownership ends extraction. Renting secures it. A population renting the right to remain in the system cannot negotiate. Someone who owns their home can say no. Someone who rents cannot. This isn't the market failing. This is the market working for the people it was built for. When crisis becomes profitable, stability becomes a threat. When recovery threatens margins, recovery is delayed. The system is not malfunctioning. It is evolving past the need for a middle class. We've seen this logic before. JP Morgan stabilizes the system and gains leverage over policy. 2008. BlackRock's risk frameworks become the emergency backstop for global markets. Every downturn creates a king. Every crisis crowns a winner. This isn't conspiracy. It's precedent. Stability used to be the objective. Now volatility is the revenue model. A ladder once meant to lift households is being repurposed as a gate to keep them out. By 2030, the Western economy begins to resemble what economists call Brazilianization, a narrow elite of asset holders and a population servicing those assets forever. The middle class does not collapse. It dissolves, quietly, without headlines, without recognition. Because collapse was never the point. Transition was. And transitions don't need to break the system to change it. They only need to reassign who it serves. So the question is not, is the silent depression real? The better question is, how deep into it are we already? If this were a crisis, someone would be trying to stop it. But if this is a transition, then what we are calling collapse might, from another perspective, be construction. If this isn't a mistake, then it's succession. If this isn't temporary, then it's structural. And if the people who own the assets eventually own the debt, what happens when they begin to own the debtors? The future isn't collapsing. It's being claimed. And the only question left is, will you notice before the door finishes closing?